committees. Senator, good morning.
Good morning to you.
So the Wall Street Journal writing an op-ed about, in particular, this move that Axios reported over the weekend, that the Biden administration is holding on to one ammunition shipment that was supposed to go out last week to Israel. Axios saying the Israelis are scrambling and they're nervous because they are worried that this is going to be the start of maybe the Biden administration pulling back support for them and military operations. What can you tell us?
Cheryl, it's very disturbing. I've seen the same reports that you have. We've inquired in the State Department to determine the veracity of these reports. But if it's true, I think it's quite disturbing. And frankly, it's not surprising. The Biden administration has been using both sidisms here. They're basically saying we support Israel at the same time. They're doing everything they can to support Hamas. I don't see them imposing any sorts of constraints when they relax the sanctions on Iran. No constraints at all when they help our adversaries. But here we are with our only ally, our only real ally in the Middle East. And the Biden administration is imposing constraint after constraint, trying to dictate what happens politically within that country, and now trying to dictate the terms of war on the ground. Rafah is a tough situation. They need to step back and allow the Israelis to do what they know to do to deal with this.
Well, what did you make of those comments from Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday? Holocaust Remembrance Day, by the way. He is not backing down. He continues to say that Israel has a right to defend itself no matter what. He's made it very clear that if we have to go alone, we will go alone. That's one thing I want to ask you about. The other is that the Wall Street Journal had an op-ed this morning about this ammunitions pullback that reportedly had happened, saying that this is another mistake by the Biden administration because they keep inserting themselves into these negotiations of a ceasefire, which never happens. It's happened once. And that the White House is making, again, a calculated mistake in how it handles the war between Israel and Gaza. The Palestinians.
I think we've got
Hamas, excuse me. Hamas.
It's like a split screen TV here. What's happening in Israel is what needs to happen, and the Israeli people support this far and away. The Israeli people support what Benjamin Netanyahu is executing. We should not have Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden trying to insert themselves into domestic politics there in Israel. They should simply be supporting our ally. What's happening here in America is quite a different story. What you have is a great focus by this White House on what's happening in Michigan and Minnesota. They're very much focused on the November elections. They're appeasing, these radicals on college campuses, whatever they need to do to somehow support and appease these Hamas protesters here in America, because they're concerned about this very fragile coalition that Joe Biden is trying to put together for November 2024.
Well, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre discussed a potential plan to bring Palestinian refugees into the U.S. And she says they're taking this very seriously, in particular the issue of vetting. A group of more than 30 Republican senators have written now to the administration demanding they end plans to bring in Gazan refugees and focus on securing the release of U.S. hostages that are held by Hamas. Are you in agreement with those other Republicans?
I certainly am. You can understand the concern. This administration is incapable of maintaining our own southern border. We've got people on the terrorist watch list that are walking across our southern border every day. The thought that the Biden administration could properly vet these people coming from Gaza, where 70% of the citizens of Gaza support what Hamas did on October the 7th. I think it is very hard to imagine that we're not going to see even more introduction of people that would be a danger to our national security if the Biden administration goes through with this $3.5 billion plan that they announced the minute the Senate approved the last major bill that came through the Congress.
Well, also, too, what's happening here at home relating to the war in the Middle East. Anti-Israel protesters hoisted a large Palestinian flag above its encampment at George Washington University. This was yesterday, Senator. And then the campus statue of George Washington, the founder of our nation, remains defaced. This morning, the university's president calls the encampment, quote, increasingly unsafe. Doesn't seem to be doing much more to clear it out. And then the Wall Street Journal is reporting that left-leaning activist groups trained students for months, well before these protests started, Senator. Do you think we should have a federal investigation to the Department of Justice or the FBI, someone, start to look into who these agitators are on these campuses, where they came from, and where are they getting their support, whether it's domestic support or it's overseas support?
Well, I think it's quite disturbing to Americans to see what's happening on our college campuses. Not all college campuses, of course, but the illustration that you just gave with respect to George Washington University, the grandfather of our nation, George Washington, having his statue defaced. This is happening in campus after campus after campus. And when we learn that it's organized, I don't know why Americans should be surprised in any respect. People like George Soros have been fomenting dissent in America for years. We do have foreign agitators as well, people like Hans-Georg Wyss, Swiss billionaire, who is doing everything he can to distort American elections. Again, it's interesting that this type of thing happens before major presidential election years. You go back to 2012 with Occupy Wall Street, you know, the BLM riots that took place in 2020, and here we are today. I think that the American public ought to be very disturbed. We ought to investigate this, and rather than have the FBI go after parents that attend PTA meetings and perhaps complain about mask mandates and that type of thing, they should be focused on exactly what's happening here in America and who's behind it.
Senator Bill Hagerty, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you, and please keep us posted
Great to be with you.
all things happening in Washington this week. Senator, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.